Lin frowned and thought he couldn't hide from the danger, so it was worth taking the initiative and attacking first. But wasn't it just dinner? Lin hid the gun in the holster of his belt. He opened the front door and frowned, looking straight ahead. A cool breeze began to blow. Lin had a lantern in one hand, and his other hand was tightly gripping someone's heart. Lin wasn't a vegetarian either, by the way. The doctor stepped out of the door. He slammed the door behind him as soon as he was outside. Scary dark shadows and alien pairs of eyes stared at Lin. He immediately waved his head and trembled, his lips tightly pressed together. He swallowed loudly to himself. Well, Lin nervously opened the system table. In the window that opened, the following information appeared. Lin, level 6, race, human, strength 17, agility 18, intelligence level 21, health 34, skills, infectious or. The hero can increase the success rate of lobbying. Curse diagnosis. When the diagnosis process for the presence of a curse is performed, then it can find out if the opponent is under a group curse. Lin rubbed his chin nervously, clenching his teeth tightly as the breeze blew over him. What a lucky thing it is to be in this world with all the characteristics of a body and a few life skills. Lin walked forward, holding the lantern out in front of him. He looked around carefully. If you can't physically resist the darkness, you can always outsmart it. Lin came to a shabby house. Its walls were made of stone, and the roof and doors were made of ordinary wood. Lights were visible in the windows. Lin swallowed loudly, curling his lips. He opened the front door, crouching slightly to peer inside. Lin said that he came to visit Madam. Lin walked a little further down the corridor. It was quite long. On the sides of it were countertops with various utensils. The doctor held the lantern higher, trying to see what was on the wall. In the dark, it wasn't immediately clear what exactly these huge things were, but in the light of a flashlight, it turned out that they were human remains. Several dried-up bodies and remains of humans and other creatures hung from the ceiling, head down. Lin flinched, his eyes widening and turning bloodshot. Lin took one of the remains by the skull and pulled it towards him, giving the skeleton a funny tickle on the cheekbone. The doctor smiled nervously and told the corpse that he wasn't as handsome as he was. Lin walked even further, examining the remains of the creatures. Many of them were tied up rather crudely with iron chains, some were tied with only one leg and hung grotesquely from the ceiling. He reached the end of a long corridor and saw a portrait of a girl hanging on the wall. The painting hung over the dining table, various dishes were placed on the table itself, and there were 3 chairs around the table. At 2 opposite ends of it were candle stands with candles burning in them. Lin walked closer to the table and asked if Madam was here. He looked around. There was no answer to his question. Lin went behind the table and sat down at the right end of the table, placing the lantern on the table. On the huge mirror, Lin could be seen sitting at the table. Statistics: total viewers 500-401. Madam sat cross-legged and watched the doctor through this huge mirror. In one of her hands was a glass filled with something red. She smiled, her eyes glowing turquoise in the dark. She said that the doctor had finally come to see them, and it was a good thing that he had, because everyone here was waiting for him to die, so they should have waited just a little while to see this spectacle. Comments from various viewers were displayed on the giant screen. Blood puppet, I don't think it's a good idea to kill him now. He's a disciple of the Blood Saw. If you kill his disciple now, the Blood Saw will finish you all off. Flaming ghost, how can the queen be afraid of this? This Blood Saw is a psychotic killer, and so is his student. The little man must pay for what he did in our alley of wandering souls. Ghost Skull, evil queen, how do you plan to kill him? Lin, meanwhile, sat down at the table with his hands folded in front of him. Madam, who was watching him, smiled maliciously as she adjusted her hat on her head, a look that didn't bode well. She replied that she thought just killing him would be too easy, and she wanted to break his spirit and then calmly enjoy his fear-stricken face. With her other free hand, she cradled a small girl lying in a kind of wooden cradle. In Madam's opinion, Lin should have paid the full price for the horror he had done to her daughter. The woman snapped her fingers, and a huge wall of one-eyed tentacles appeared behind her. The Madam grinned and told them all to take a closer look at what exactly she had come up with. One of the tentacles reached out toward her. She gave it a sharp squeeze and yanked, ripping off the tentacles. Her eyes were bloodthirsty and mad. She told everyone to just wait a bit, and then they would witness Lin's painful death. Lin yawned loudly, covering his mouth with his hand and crossing his legs. Suddenly, he was surrounded by the chains that held the corpses. The dead rose up, some walking toward him, some crawling. Lin smiled nervously and decided that it must have been a hallucination, and he was definitely imagining things. He heard a strange thud behind him. Whirling around, he saw a lot of bodies moving straight towards him. Lin immediately started thinking that he probably hadn't imagined it after all, and a huge crowd of corpses was actually walking towards him. Lin immediately jumped up from his seat, pushing his chair to the side. He closed his eye, taking a deep breath, and then opened it to see a withered dead man rushing toward him. Lin frowned, looking straight ahead. He kept in mind that he should just watch them and not make any sudden movements. But as soon as he turns away for a second, these vile creatures will immediately come to him and devour him. Linen's face was dripping with sweat and he kept his eyes wide open. You couldn't even blink. Linen carefully looked at the crowd, but he couldn't stand it and closed his eyes sharply, and after opening them, he saw the face of a dead man in front of him, ready to rush at him. The doctor screamed loudly. Comments from the audience on the screen of the huge mirror began to pour in, as expected from the Blood Queen. The way she made a person scared is so amazing that if I were that guy, I'd be terrified too. Yes, anyone would be horrified to see the bodies of so many dead people suddenly come to life. He is clearly very scared since he can't even blink, but if he does blink again, his head will immediately be bitten off. The madam was watching the show carefully and laughing horribly, showing her sharp teeth. But this was just the beginning, and all the fun was waiting for Linen ahead. Suddenly, the woman's expression twitched. Linen walked closer to the corpse and grabbed its jaw, opening its mouth wide and looking inside. When he saw the golden tooth, he reached for it and jerked it out of the dead man's jaw. No one knew how to comment on it. The corpses also stared at him questioningly. The corpse that he had just pulled out a tooth shifted its gaze to his hand, where his golden tooth rested. Linen patted the corpse's shoulder and said that he didn't even expect it to have such good teeth. Comments appeared on the screen. Blood puppet, just now. What did he take out of that dead man's mouth? Flaming ghost, similar to a gold tooth. Gold is highly prized in the human world, like we have skull coins. Linen looked at the crowd of dead people in front of him with a smile. Blood puppet, it doesn't look like he was scared at all. Evil queen, impossible. I can see that he's just pretending. Ghost skull, look out. He moved. Linen crouched down slightly, carefully observing the corpse in front of him. All he could think about was that he couldn't get it together. A few more comments came up. Ghost skull, does it look like it's going to run away? Linen shifted his gaze to the other corpse. These mummies seemed to have considerable powers. He took out a huge knife that he had hidden under his white cloak beforehand. The commentators watched intently, waiting to see what would happen next. Linen abruptly twitched and flew this knife right between where his buttocks used to be. Madam jerked, horrified by what she saw. Her eyes widened in surprise and her brow furrowed. Linen kept stabbing the corpse in the same place. The blood puppet wanted to write something, but it just sent a blank message. The flaming ghost wrote, he stabbed him with a knife. He stabbed him with a knife. Linen walked away from the corpse that had fallen limply to the ground with a smug smile. Ghost skull, so much for the mummy. Linen moved on to the next mummy. When he saw the doctor, he looked down at him questioningly. Linen swung the knife. There were comments that he was some kind of maniac and something was wrong. Linen stabbed him right in the same spot as the last mummy. Someone wrote that their puppets didn't scare him at all. It seems that he gets crazier and crazier when he stabs. No, I've had enough. I don't want to see this disgusting picture. Yes, he's not afraid of them at all. And many other surprised comments from watching viewers. Linen smiled viciously and frowned, addressing the crowd and asking who would be next. The crowd in front of him trembled. Watching this, the madam viciously clenched her teeth and frowned. The mirror in front of her reflected a huge crowd of corpses. She shouted out that there were no more restrictions, and their main goal was to kill Linen. Magic enveloped the corpses, and their eyes glowed red and bright, and fangs appeared instead of their normal teeth. The corpses howled loudly. Linen grinned and held up a knife. He charged straight into the crowd of corpses in front of him. One by one, they suffered the same fate of being killed by a kick to the anus. The corpses continued to advance, but Linen deftly avoided them, running between the rows, and the corpses fell one after another. Madam slapped her forehead, closing her eyes. The creatures wrote comments that said, wow, this man is so cool. They were all killed, and he doesn't seem to have a drop of fear in him. He's not afraid at all. How does he want to escape? Ghost skull, why did he escape? Did he really run away? Linen dealt with the entire crowd. They were lying in a pile on top of each other. The doctor ran for the door. The comments on the screen read, flaming ghost, how is it? First you played brave, and now you're getting cold feet. Ghost skull, wait, what is that sound? There was an impending commotion. Flaming ghost, that voice sounds so familiar, like I've heard it somewhere before. Blood puppet, hush. This sound is getting closer and closer. Linen returned, kicking down the front door. He held the knife out in front of him and shouted loudly at her not to frighten him, because he was getting a little impatient. Linen was gripping the handle of the knife tightly. He added that today he would chop them all into pieces and feed them to his baby. The crowd of monsters immediately stirred up. Linen rushed over to the corpse and began slashing at it furiously. A notification flashed that the mental state dropped by -1. Then again the mental state dropped by -1. Then once again the mental state dropped by -1. The madam watched him closely with a serious expression. Blood puppet, don't look. Don't look. It's too scary. He doesn't even spare a corpse. Long-haired ghost, and it's not bad. He's about to finish everyone off. Haha, flaming ghost, he's not normal at all. The queen shouldn't treat him like an ordinary person. He looks scarier than any monster. Linen broke off after hearing the system. The system window flashed up and said, ding. The blood puppet's fear level in front of you has skyrocketed, and your reward is plus 100 base experience points. Ding. You've terrified a flaming ghost into clutching at your heart in fear, and your reward is 150 experience points in fighting shadows. Ding. You were able to prevent the long-haired ghost from 2, your reward plus 200 exp. Ding. Your popularity in Wandering Souls Lane has increased to 30. Linen was standing in the middle of the corridor with a chainsaw in his hand. He carefully looked around and asked what had happened, because so many experience points were added in vain. And the creatures with those names are his former patients, but he hasn't seen them here. The doctor calmly shrugged his shoulders with a smile on his face and noted that it was strange. He reached into the painting on the wall and rummaged through it. Taking out a file with some contents, he poured the red contents into a glass and took a sip from the glass. Linen sat down on a chair, crossing his legs. The doctor smiled contentedly and thought that the wine was certainly not bad. New comments appeared on the screen. Blood Doll, I believe that this doctor is a person who is the leader of the group and is responsible for the game and his teammates. Responsible and smart, I think it's a very good idea to be around him all the time. Long-haired ghost, haha, I'm sure this kid isn't worried about his money at all, he certainly won't be robbed. Flaming ghost, that's right, I think this guy is hard to catch off guard. Madam smiled at herself in the mirror. She said it didn't matter because he would still be a weak little man. The woman pulled her hat down over her eyes and added that since he wasn't afraid of the corpses, then they should come up with something more sophisticated. Linen looked at the glass carefully and frowned. He whirled around, hearing something and asking about what that noise was just now. Behind him was the same painting he had seen before. It showed a woman in a red dress and hat, with her hair pulled back and a cute smile on her face. Linen took a closer look at the painting. He thought that it was strange, and how could there be oil paintings from the human world here? He folded his arms and stared intently at the painting. The painting's gaze frowned and shifted to him. The doctor immediately started up and was surprised that the painting's eyes were moving. Suddenly a hand was laid on his shoulder. Linen whirled around, and there was something sinister in front of his face, reaching out with its hands towards him. A ghost with long black hair falling over its face stood in front of Linen with its mouth wide open. Linen looked back with a slight smile on his face. The screen lit up with new comments from viewers. The flaming ghost, indeed, such an illusory ghost was the most terrifying to look at. Long-haired ghost, I'm afraid that if I turned around and saw such a picture, I would definitely be scared. Skeleton demon, really? You're a ghost yourself, aren't you? Afraid of your own kind. Long-haired ghost, but I used to be a human and everyone is afraid of ghosts, everyone knows that. The madam took off her hat and smiled as she looked at Linen in the mirror. She laughed. In her opinion, he was already so scared that he couldn't even move. Come on, scream, beg for mercy, show her your confused and helpless look. Linen smiled charmingly and said, hello, pretty girl. Everyone gaped. Even the monsters to the side opened their mouths, and so did Madam. The doctor took Ghost's hand and led her along, saying that he knew it was just a show, and she was just an extra who was hired by the evil queen. So Linen suggested not to waste time on worries and quarrels, but to go well to the table and eat with him. The ghost behind him opened its mouth wide, its red eyes flashing. Linen ignored this and told her to go ahead and take her seat. Linen spun around and swung his hand, taking the ghost's head off its neck. The doctor was indignant at why she opened her mouth so wide. Everyone watching started up in surprise. Linen stood there calmly and flexed the hand that he had just hit. New comments are displayed in the mirror window. Flaming ghost, wait, something's not right here. If the ghost lost its head, then how strong must the slap have been? Long-haired ghost, can this doctor touch ghosts like this? Skeleton demon, we're in trouble, we're in trouble. The ghost's head rested not far from his body on the floor. Linen walked over to her and picked her up by her hair, causing the ghost to open its mouth wide again. The doctor brought the head back into place and placed it on the neck, saying that there was no need to scare people so much and couldn't she just be a pretty girl. The ghost stood with its mouth wide open and was surprised that Linen could touch her. Linen smiled and furrowed his brows as he displayed a flask of green liquid in front of him. He explained that he was a pharmacist and dealing with evil spirits was his job. How else do they think O could operate on ghosts without a special potion to touch them with? The ghost said nothing, looking at Linen. Linen raised the ghost's hand to his face and said by the way that his name was Linen, and they could get to know each other better. New comments appeared on the screen. Flaming ghost, this. What just happened? Events are taking increasingly strange turns. Long-haired ghost, this man is a pervert, and this ghost girl is really ugly. Skeleton demon, it's not like that, this person definitely messed up something. Madam frowned, clutching her head. She had completely forgotten about how good this guy was, and the greater this illusion, the more it corresponds to her, that is, the ghost, appetite. What was the matter? Didn't that really scare him? The ghost stood in front of Linen with its mouth wide open. No, a creature from the dark would never let its mistress down. The ghost's face contorted, the scalp at the point where his brows met pulled back to reveal his brains, and his mouth opened even wider, revealing a long, protruding tongue. Linen stared at her in silence for a moment, then smiled happily. He reached out to her and told her that he really liked her, and the ghost turned around in horror and started running away, shouting at Linen not to go near her. Linen grabbed the ghost's arm with an awkward smile. He frowned and smiled, bowing his head and telling her that he knew perfectly well that she wanted to scare him, but she wasn't good enough at it, and let him show her what real horror was like. He leaned her hand against his chest with a smile on his lips. He asked the ghost if she could feel the pulse. The ghost quizzically asked what he was doing at all. Linen replied that what he was saying was that he was going to show her the real horror. He moved the ghost's hand further under his clothes, pressing it to his chest. Linen asked, "How about we clarify something? Did the ghost touch something like this, something warm that still has blood running down it?" Yes, she was holding his heart, and that was what she was touching. The monsters opened their mouths in shock. A notification flashed that said mental health dropped by -1, 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 mental health dropped by -1. Linen moved closer to the ghost as it stood with its mouth wide open. With a smile on his face, the doctor added that everything is correct, and gradually they will have to pinch each other's heart. This will allow the target to clearly feel the fear that covers the heart. After that, you should make sure that he is watching and sees how your hand slowly pulls the heart out of his chest until it sees the flesh. The ghost stood with a heart in his hand. Everyone stared at the scene in silence, watching carefully. Even Madame leaned closer to the mirror, her mouth hanging open. With a smile on his face, Linen wanted to add something, but he abruptly bumped into the ghost, so much so that everyone watching immediately started up in surprise. A notification flashed that the blood puppet's mental state had dropped by -50, the flaming ghost's mental state had dropped by -50, the skull demon's mental state had dropped by -60, and the long-haired ghost's mental state had dropped by -40. On the street outside the house, various screams could be heard merging into one loud one. A notification was displayed about where different comments from viewers were written. Skull Demon, stop it, oh, stop it. Go home, I really want to go home. Blood Doll, Mom is, please stop scaring us. Flaming Ghost, just don't read this, don't read it. Linen took the heart that was handed to the ghost back and gently blew on it, blowing away the excess garbage from it and saying that it was not worth worrying too much, because this heart belonged to one faceless creature and does not belong to him, but just in case he carries it with him. Linen winked and gave a thumbs up, asking about how it went and whether the performance made a proper impression. So it is, first you need to strain the mind of your interlocutor and then create scary sound effects and illusions. This will allow your opponents to break themselves in their spirit, take them by surprise. Linen held the heart in his hands and asked if the ghost had learned it. The ghost looked a little droopy, giving off an ominous aura. She said that it was useless to study, useless, and let Linen not come any closer to her and get out of here. A notification appeared that said, mental state -10, mental state -10. Ding. The blood puppet's attitude towards you has changed from fear to extreme fright, reward, plus 200 base experience. Ding. The skull demon's character has changed from brave to cowardly, reward, plus 300 base experience. Ding. Long-haired ghost's character trait has been transformed from hysterical to very hysterical, reward, plus 300 base experience. Linen looked up at the notification window and thought that this was strange, and how could he have gotten so much basic experience? Did they all watch it like it was some kind of reality show? Comments were displayed on the mirror screen. Blood Puppet, the Queen, the Queen. We need to stop the live broadcast. This guy is not a normal person who tolerates violence. Demon Skull, it hasn't cracked yet, but we'll look at it again, and I hope it breaks first. Flaming Ghost, Queen, it seems that your daughter was disfigured and frightened to tears by him. This guy was specially trained in this scare technique. Madame frowned in displeasure, folding her arms across her chest. She was thinking that Linen was such a scoundrel, she wanted to fool him, but it turned out the other way around. The woman slammed the table hard and said that this was the end of their live broadcast right now, after which she would go down and kill him on the spot right away, and let them wait for the good news. Madame started, glancing back at the mirror. She studied his face. Linen was discovered. The guy was standing in front of the girl's picture, and the eyes on her face dimmed and turned into dark slits in the picture. The creature's comments flashed on the screen. Bloody smile, Queen, don't take it personally. I recommend that you throw yourself down, choke him and slap him, and then chop off his head. Skull Demon, that's it, don't let it open its mouth, just chop off its head with one blow to avoid possible trouble. Long-haired Ghost, you, no, isn't that too tactless, stranger? Long-haired Demon, oh, heh, I just said without thinking, never mind. Evil Queen, don't worry, but wait for the good news, because I plan to take his head and put it in the corner of the room so he will answer for everything that he did to my daughter. Madam pointed at the mirror. She looked horrified. Her arms and legs were gone, blood was pouring from those places. They were torn off, there was a huge swarm of giant tentacles behind her back, her eyes were mad, and her mouth was open and showing a bunch of sharp teeth. She now looked even more terrifying than before. She said that she had put up with Lin for too long and that it would finally happen today. Instead of the arms and legs, there were more muscular versions, and the veins on the arms were swollen. Suddenly, a ghost ran into her room and told her that Lin said that he couldn't wait to see her anymore, so he wanted to come to her in person. He had just walked out the door to find himself in the backyard. The madam's mouth opened wide, her eyes were bloodshot, and the veins on her face were bulging. All she said was what a nasty boy Lin was. The madam quickly moved into the courtyard, passing unusual plants and various bones scattered everywhere. She turned to Lin and told him to come out to her immediately. She roused herself, seeing a familiar silhouette in the window. Her face twisted. She realized that Lin seemed to be in her bedroom right now. She rushed into the bedroom, shouting as she went that there was only one road for Lin and that was the road to hell. Suddenly, she was startled when she saw Lin holding a baby in her arms. Anger twisted her face. It reached out its tentacles to Lin and demanded that her daughter be released immediately. The doctor held the little girl close and replied that this was how Madam showed her hospitality. After all, she had invited him to dinner. However, he received nothing but shock and fear because it was cold and unpleasant down there. The madam gave him a murderous look and told him not to dare pretend to be kind after all that he had done to her daughter. Or will Lin continue to lie about how it wasn't him who did it? She clenched her fists tightly and stared at the doctor, adding that it was his fault, but he still wouldn't stop talking about how her daughter was a reflection of kindness in herself. She desperately wanted to tear him to pieces. Lin raised his hand with a calm expression and replied that he didn't care what the madam knew exactly there. However, he swore that he didn't have the slightest intention of fooling her. Lightning struck outside the window, and the guy commented with a smile, saying that there was thunder and rumbling outside just now. Suddenly, everyone fell silent at his comment, and Lin actually blushed a little. He awkwardly put his hand to his forehead, telling her that she had just seen it, too, and the lightning had struck so hard just as he was speaking. And wasn't that enough to prove the truth of his words? Madam folded her arms and laughed mirthlessly. She still gave off a vicious and displeased aura. Lin sat down on the bed with the little girl and said that yes, it was still his mistake, but he did not want to harm her, but rather the opposite. Madam was indignant and said that he could continue to make up such nonsense, and she would see how long he was going to make it up on the fly. Lin smiled awkwardly and replied that even more so when his daughter was born. She should have seen how wrinkled her face was back then. If he hadn't corrected something about her, it was possible that the pig-headed demon wouldn't have recognized her as his daughter and would have given her up, and where would he go? So out of the kindness of his heart, he made this child cute. A notification appeared stating that the danger level had reached 87%, then the danger level reached 97%. Lin held up his hands and said that of course, there were other reasons to claim that he was telling the truth. The madam impatiently demanded that he say everything immediately. Lin said with a smile on his face that he was scared to death and that he was afraid that when her child completely turned into a good being, she would kill him because she was supposed to be an evil spirit. The madam opened her mouth and said it was a reasonable explanation since the girl was her daughter after all. Lin added that in addition, he wants to use his knowledge and experience and see if he can make the girl more suitable for the requirements of the madam. The madam asked if he really wanted to practice his abilities on her child's face and if there was any good reason for that. Lin raised his hand in front of the madam and immediately said yes, there is. Lin smiled and scratched his head, saying that he wanted a relationship with a cute girl or something. The little girl looked at him happily. Madam was startled by his answer. Lin immediately waved it off and added that it was just a joke and shouldn't have been taken so personally. The madam immediately lost her temper and said that it wasn't funny at all. Her eyes glowed with a bright, fierce fire, and many tentacles appeared behind her, which immediately rushed towards Lin. He covered himself with his hands, shouting loudly for her to stop, and he actually had a reason. Her tentacles stopped right next to his face, asking him again. Madam asked what other reason there might be. Lin slightly pushed one of her tentacles aside and replied that he was, to be honest, a simple doctor and many of his patients were kind to him, and so they became friends. They will be very angry and upset if she kills him, and then they will start taking revenge on Madam. For example, two bald men are still fighting to the death. The madam's eyes were bloodshot again and she asked if Lin had mentioned the Witcher and the Dark Knight, were they really his friends? Madam immediately added that she would never believe such a thing. Lin rummaged in his pockets for a bit and took out two pistols from his bosom, holding them out in front of him. With a smirk on his face, he replied that it was up to her to believe him or not, but she probably knew everything from his weapon, didn't she? Madame opened her eyes wide and asked if those were the spook's revolvers. Linen confirmed her guess. She said that a hunter never leaves his revolver, and how could Linen have got it? Linen turned it over in his hands and replied that since they were of the same race and he liked it very much, he made a similar gesture and gave a gift. And if he is in danger, one shot and he will immediately come to his aid. Linen held the gun out in front of him, pointing it at the lady. Since the hunter had left the territory of Wandering Soul Lane, it wouldn't take long for him to get here. Somewhere in the distance, a bald hunter sneezed. Linen rummaged in his bosom again and took out something else, namely hair. Madame, horrified, asked him what else it was. Linen replied with a smile on his face that it was a sign of his friendship with Uncle Hai, his chest hair being the longest and curly in the entire world. Madame was a little taken aback and asked again about the chest hair. Linen added affirmatively that today, when he was getting his hair cut at his uncle's, he told him that there was a dark seal on Linen and trouble might haunt him, so he gave him this to drive away evil spirits. The woman asked if the hair on his chest can also scare away evil spirits, and with a smirk, holding up a finger in front of him, Linen replied that yes, and if any evil spirit dares to harm him, then Uncle will definitely feel it. Linen put his fingers to his temple and said, "Come to think of it, there isn't a person who dares to cut off another person's hair that cares so much about their reputation, right? But I took the risk and did it, and there was nothing for it. Didn't that show how close we were?" A black knight somewhere in the distance also sneezed. Madame frowned. That's right, she had already fought a black knight and demon hunters once before, and both of them were great fighters. According to them, if any of them really shaved their heads, they would definitely be dead by now. No wonder Linen was so weak but still alive. So that was the reason Linen was so cocky. Linen stood in front of the woman with his arms folded and a proud smile on his face. Linen smiled. He thought about the possibility that the madam might be bluffing, and it was a good thing that he had noticed and understood it in time. Madam frowned and said it couldn't be, and he was probably trying to trick her again. The Dark Knight and the Witcher have been at war for centuries, and as you know, even a friend of the enemy is your enemy, so it's impossible and they just can't be friends of Linen. Madame pointed a finger at Linen. He looked at her in surprise, his mouth hanging open. The woman smiled triumphantly and added that she wasn't so stupid, she had seen through him easily, and Linen shouldn't have tried to deceive her. The doctor smiled and said that she probably didn't know something important. They might seem like sworn enemies, but they were actually a couple of lovers who were dying to love each other. Madame's mouth dropped open in shock. Meanwhile, the hunter and knight continued their battle. They jumped away from each other, and the hunter held his sword out in front of him, complaining that he sneezed all the time and that he probably cursed and remembered him all the time. The knight gritted his teeth in displeasure and replied that it was not necessary to hang this nonsense on him, and in general the hunter himself slanders and mocks him in his thoughts. The knight will definitely put poison in his food today. They clashed again. Linen was sitting on a chair. Crossing his legs, he continued that they would rather not talk about them anymore, but rather discuss his teacher, his wandering soul in this alley. How many did he cut with his chainsaw? Linen is his only disciple and heir, and does Madame think that he will allow someone to kill him? Also, the scavenger in their wandering soul alley loves him so much that he's always treated Linen like his own grandson. Linen can't imagine how upset his grandmother would be if such a smart, good, and obedient grandson suddenly died. A sign flashed up saying that eloquence increased by +1, then eloquence increased by +1, then eloquence increased by +1. Madame immediately lost heart and thought that it was just a horror, and she screwed up terribly in front of him. Although she wanted to madly chop him into pieces, but don't underestimate his friends. Linen frowned and noticed how discouraged the madam was at his last statement. Linen took out something red and shiny from his pocket, showing it to the madam with a smile on his face. He asked her if she knew what it was and if she had ever seen it before. The madam opened her eyes wide, her mouth hanging open. Linen added that it was true that it was a fragment of a tooth from one of the ghost hunters. The woman recognized this and remembered what it was. They had eaten many creatures from their street yesterday. She remembered the monster's huge mouth that stretched out in front of her. She barely managed to get out of one mouth, not to end up in the other. Linen grinned contentedly. And this is the kind of creature that even king-level overlords are forced to retreat from. And Linen was actually able to get even a piece of their teeth. Linen held it up with 2 fingers and smiled, saying that the madam probably knew yesterday's news about how many creatures had died near Wandering Soul Lane yesterday, which was literally innumerable. And why does she think only Wandering Soul Lane escaped this fate? The madam continued to stare at the doctor in shock, asking why. Linen replied that it was all because one of the hunters was a friend of his. Once upon a time, a monarch with great power appeared in the world of darkness. A man with long black hair and a large build sat on the throne with his arms folded and a frown on his face. During his reign, his subjects were well fed and clothed, and his soldiers wore armor worth millions. In front of the man was a huge crowd wrapped in dark robes. And then one day a noble monarch insulted a monster of the highest rank by intending to subdue it. The man was standing in front of a creature, red and large, with huge horns on its head. The monster couldn't withstand such humiliation, and in an instant during the day, it destroyed all the creatures in the great monarch's territory. It killed everyone. Only ruins remain of the once glorious kingdom. Human remains and bones lay among the huge houses, shrouded in dust and smoke. When the crown on the Lord's head finally fell to the ground, a new law appeared in this dark world. Madame listened intently, her mouth hanging open. She thought that if she understood correctly, then one of the bounty hunters was really Linen's friend. It was possible that the ones he just mentioned could be dealt with by her, but if it displeased the bounty hunters, then they would find her and kill her in the most brutal way, even if she somehow escaped to the higher world. Linen spread his hands and said that even though he was weakened, his connections with other creatures were still very strong. In fact, she shouldn't have been angry with him, since they were neighbors after all. Linen smiled brightly and added that shouldn't neighbors take care of each other, help each other out in difficult situations, and keep each other warm on cold nights. Besides, she's so beautiful and wise, like an older sister. Linen took one of its tentacles in his hand. A notification flashed up that said eloquence increased by +1, then eloquence increased by +1 again. Madame's eyes widened as she noticed that smile on his face again, which was telling her, "You want to sleep with me, but you can't." The woman laughed out loud. Then she turned around, and a second later turned back, telling him that he was right, and as they say, close neighbors are not as good as relatives, and it will be better for them to get along well in the future. The little girl in Linen's arms reached out with her hands. The madam returned to her original appearance, looking like an extremely beautiful girl once again. She thought about how she could only restrain herself for now, but once she got the chance, she would definitely kill him. Linen replied that it was a good thing that it ended like this, because he wasn't going to lie to her, of course, but what he said earlier was only a third of a lie, but it didn't mean that it was all for the sake of fooling her. Although kindness is indeed something out of the ordinary in their situation, he still sees in Madame qualities that other evil spirits cannot possess. The madam bowed her head, asking if he really thought that of her, but her mind was filled with thoughts that Linen was probably just deceiving her again, and that he was a total scoundrel. Linen walked closer to the woman and looked down at her, telling her that she was actually very beautiful. Madam blushed slightly. Linen looked around and said that her room was very nice. The interior was well appointed, and not far from Linen there was a dressing table with various care products on it and a red table mirror. The doctor added that unlike those cold and disgusting rooms in the dungeon, it was obvious that Madame had carefully arranged her bedroom. The madam immediately shook her head sharply from side to side, saying that it was an accident, and thinking that he didn't have to try to flatter her because she couldn't be fooled. She held the little girl in front of her, wrapping her arms around her and holding her close as the child reached out with her arms towards Linen. The guy pointed a finger forward, adding that whether it was the walls, the bed, or the table and chairs, they all gave a feeling of freshness and lightness that you would never find in the homes of other evil spirits. Linen looked at the blue flower vase that was resting on the windowsill. He said that this lily was particularly beautiful. It was very difficult for such a delicate flower to survive in such a dark world. It blooms so much that it's definitely thanks to Madame's careful care. The girl frowned slightly, blushing and telling him not to say anything stupid. Linen's brows drew together and he grinned. Fine, he's perfectly attuned to the rhythm. A notification was displayed that the level of preparation for the attack has increased by +50%. Linen smiled at her and said that as he remembered, she hated her daughter's cute appearance, didn't she? Madame asked what was wrong with that, and the doctor said that he would like to ask her then about what happened to her outfit. Linen pointed at the little girl. She was wearing a red vest and dress and a purple bow tied on her head. He asked if Madame had just knitted that dress and waistcoat. Madame immediately blushed and began to stutter, and then replied that well, there was no point in denying it, since he had already seen everything. Linen said that it was just that the baby was so cute that she wanted to kiss and hug him all the time, didn't she? The woman immediately began to deny his words and tell him not to say such stupid things. The doctor began to get closer to her and tell her that it wasn't really a terrible thing that every mother wanted to be close to her daughter and spend all her free time with her. It was the same for the two of them. Even though the madam was an evil spirit, there was true human love in her heart, and it seemed to him that if they lived in the human world, they would be the sweetest girl in the world. Madame blushed and her eyes glittered as she clarified what he was really saying about the human world. She began to think that it seemed that she would never be able to forget her human life, and if she hadn't died then, she would still be an ordinary girl in the human world. An image of her standing with her daughter and hugging a man's hand appeared in her mind. She could get married, have children, and then live a happy life with the person she loves. However, reality constantly told her otherwise. She was already dead, and she's just an evil spirit with an ugly and disgusting face. So she had to take the form of an evil spirit and let the hatred fill her from the inside out. An image of a terrifying monster with huge tentacles on its back appeared in her mind. The hope for humanity was already buried deep in her heart. Lin looked at her with an attentive look from under his brows. She had never even thought that the secret that she had been burying for years would be discovered so easily by this doctor. They stood in silence for a while when a system sign appeared that read, "Ding. Your task, deal with the evil spirit's grievance. Current progress of the task, 11%. Reward for the first stage of the task, plus 500 skull coins, plus 500 base experience, plus 1 special reward." Lin thought that everything had gone well, and the bait had just worked. But to deal with her hostility, it was necessary to find the right point of impact. Lin frowned, slightly smirking, and after a second, his face changed and assumed an innocent expression, telling the madam that she didn't seem to like the way she looked when she turned into an evil spirit at all. Did she? And he could make her human forever if only she wanted to. Madam smiled at his words and asked him what he was talking about, and it was better not to think that if he once corrected the appearance of her daughter, it meant that it would be possible to influence her too. Her daughter was just a baby, and the evil spirit curse hadn't formed in her body yet, so he was able to straighten her brain in time. Madam leaned forward a little, putting her arm around the girl's shoulders. After a second, her expression changed, her eyes lit up with a bright light, and she frowned. Her hands trembled, taking on a distorted appearance. Her fingernails turned into long claws, and huge bumps appeared on her hands. Madam said that he was going to see her face take on the appearance of an evil spirit right now, since he probably hadn't seen a real evil spirit before. That was her real identity. Madam grew in size, her body a shapeless mass, her mouth a maw from which her tongue protruded, one eye swollen shut. There were growths and eyes all over the body. She asked how Lin felt right now. Was he still confident that he would be able to stand on his own feet at the sight of her? The little girl sat down on the floor and began to cry, rubbing her eyes with a small fist. Madam looked like a real strange monster, and all that remained of the old lady was her light blonde hair. The curse, the pain, the resentment, all of it had made her what she was now. And did he really think that a simple scalpel could change all that about her? Lin was silent. A notification flashed that said the mental state dropped by -10, and then the mental state dropped by -10 again. Lin thought about what he could do, since this evil spirit's body was so ugly that it was beyond even his comprehension. He tried to calm down a little and tried to think of something, or she would kill him at any moment, any second. A system window popped up that said the danger level had reached 80%, then the danger level reached 90%. Attention, attention, the danger level was approaching the critical mark of 100%. Lin closed his eyes and frowned, thinking that he clearly hadn't expected this kind of setup. Lin opened his eyes again and said that he knew what to do. Madam was already behind the doctor, her mouth wide open. He turned to her and grinned. He grabbed her arm and told her not to move. There was a notification about the one that said, "Ding. Diagnosis of the curse, ding. Curse diagnostics complete. Curse of the evil spirit, the creature's sudden death has accumulated countless grievances. The purpose of causing harm consumed the spirit. The more resentment and hatred, the stronger the curse and the more distorted the form of the spirit. This is an extremely high-level curse." Lin smiled. He could use the time-limited ability to remove the curse. A new system window was displayed, which said, "Ding." The limited ability to remove the curse was applied together with the Huntress revolver. "Tell me, do you want to switch the ability?" Lin confirmed it. A bright, blinding light began to radiate from the place where he was holding Madam. Many small spirits began to fly up from the monster's body, enveloping her in a purple glow. She looked up at the sight. Its ugly shape began to distort, disappearing completely after a while. Lying in a pool of blood was a naked young girl with blonde hair. In Lin's hand was a gold brooch. A system notification was displayed that said, "Ding." The curse was successfully removed. The effect of the ability to remove the curse, 12 hours, ding. Plus 1 curse removal experience. The girl sat up, tucking her hair behind her ear and looking around. Lin walked over to her, crouching down in front of the recumbent girl. He smiled and said that he really wasn't lying. The madam touched her face and said that it was simply impossible. She covered her face with her hand, asking the doctor if he was really able to lift the curse from her. Lin replied about how it could have been otherwise. He is a doctor and would never deceive his own patients. He picked up the little girl and crouched down in front of the madam. They stared at each other in silence for a moment. A second later, the girl took off and began to jump happily, no longer worrying so much about the fact that she wasn't wearing any clothes. Lin looked at the girl, and she looked at him, asking the system if the curse was really lifted, because it was like the madam was acting more crazy than before. After a while, a system notification was displayed with the following information, "Ding. You have completed the first stage of the task, Evil Spirits Offense, reward, plus 500 skull coins, plus 500 base experience, special reward, plus 1 evil soul lamp. Ding. The evil spirit's favorability towards you increased by plus 10. The evil spirit's favorability towards you increased by plus 10. Lin frowned slightly and asked that he had already been here for more than half an hour and she still didn't come out. What was she doing there? Also, did this system fail? Why is she constantly saying that the favorability has increased and has already exceeded 300? The notification flashed again, stating that favorability increased by plus 10, favorability increased by plus 10, and favorability increased by plus 10 again. A voice came from behind him, saying that she had made Lin wait too long. The guy jerked in surprise and turned around. There was a beautiful girl standing in front of him, wearing a beautiful pink dress with ruffles. She apologized and said that it took too long to change her clothes. Lin blushed slightly, looking at the girl in front of him in shock. Was it really the same person in front of him? Madam sat down next to Lin with the little girl in her arms and said that she sincerely apologized to him because she had done many terrible things towards him and she was really very ashamed. Lin smiled awkwardly, saying that it was fine because neighbors should live together and understand each other, so it was fine. She blushed slightly and looked away, telling him that even though he was saying that, deep down, she still blamed herself. She couldn't have expected Lin to help her so much and even get rid of the curse. A notification about the one that said, ding. The evil spirit's favorability towards you has increased by plus 20, Jin. The evil spirit's favorability has increased by plus 20. Lin stuck out his index finger and replied with a serious face that in fact, he only helped to remove the curse temporarily, but not forever, and it will only last for 24 hours, after which it will be the same as before. Madam turned on him and asked him if it was really only 24 hours. Lin confirmed her words with an unreadable expression. Lin said that she can come to him every day and remove the spell, so it's not permanent. Madam immediately jumped up to the doctor with a joyful expression on her face, so that he blushed and recoiled slightly from surprise and began to exclaim and ask Lin if she could come to his store every day in this case. A system notification about Tom was displayed, which said, ding. The evil spirit's favorability towards you has increased by plus 20, Jin. The evil spirit's favorability towards you has increased by plus 20. Lin smiled and gave her a thumbs up, telling her that of course, and as his neighbor, she gets a 20% discount. The girl on her knees repeated it and gave the same thumbs up with a happy smile. Privately, the doctor thought that he was incredibly smart and this would not only reduce the danger level, but also give him a steady source of income. The madam's eyes shone with joy, telling her what kind of discount she was talking about and would she really have to pay. Lin smiled nobly and put out one hand in the girl's direction and put the other to her chest and replied that it takes a lot of strength and energy to get rid of the curse. And in the end, it will be a small amount and for the sake of their friendship, he can offer several free receptions and a 20% discount on subsequent receptions because he also has to earn money somehow. Madam listened intently, her mouth slightly open. She frowned, making a sad face, and asked what the price was then. Lin turned towards her in surprise and asked, did she, such a powerful lady, have no money at all? The madam arched one eyebrow and considered, putting her finger to her chin and replying that she didn't really have any because it was useless. Whatever she wanted, she could always devour her enemy and get what she wanted. The girl leaned slightly closer to the doctor, pointing a finger in his direction. Lin smiled nervously and said that since she didn't have any money, she could exchange it for other things. Various organs, herbs, cursed items, anything, as long as the price was appropriate. The madam smiled as she moved closer to Lin's face and asked how much did he think she was worth back then. The doctor immediately closed the eyes of the girl sitting next to them. Lin immediately flashed red as he looked at the girl in front of him. Madam slightly faked the strap of her dress. She was about to rush towards Lin, but then he turned away in embarrassment and started waving her off, telling her to stop immediately. Madam replied that he had called her little sister before and that she liked it very much. She crawled closer to Lin. He was still insanely red and replied that their shop doesn't accept physical payment, to which the madam replied, didn't he himself say that they accept anything that has any value? Madam crawled up to him, looking up at him and asking the doctor if he didn't think she was valuable enough. Lin straightened up and began to think about what he should do in this situation. After all, he was only a teenager. He was definitely not prepared for this. This experienced woman was scaring him. A system notification flashed, stating that the mental state had dropped to -10, then the mental state dropped to -10 again. The madam lifted herself up, slightly looming over the youth. Lin became nervous and began to think about what he should do, because if things continued like this, he would not only lose money, but also his own safety. The girl was even closer and whispered in his ear that he should not dare to delay any longer. Lin closed his eyes tightly and put his arm around the girl's shoulders. He flushed and said sharply that he couldn't do that. Madam stared at him questioningly and asked him if he had never kissed a girl before. Linen didn't say anything, closing his eyes and blushing, and the madam asked him the same thing again. Linen averted his gaze, and the girl continued to press him, asking him if he really didn't even hold a pen at all. A system notification appeared that said, "Ding. You feel that you have been very much insulted." Madam put her hand to her chin and mused about what was really going on. She was once again in close proximity to Linen and cupped his cheek while the doctor looked down in embarrassment. Madam said that in this case, she could teach him everything herself. The next day, Linen sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clenched into fists, thinking. A system notification flashed that said, "Ding. Congratulations to Linen for unlocking the achievement. Wonderful first experience. You got plus 200 base experience. Wonderful first experience." The main character Linen made a serious step from a boy to a man. The main character gets new growth bonuses, plus 1 level of constitution, plus 1 level of endurance, plus 1 level of strength, plus 1 level of strength, plus power level. Ding. The evil spirit's favorability has increased by plus 50 Jin. The evil spirit's attitude has changed from neutral to positive, reward, plus 400 base experience. Not far from Linen, Madam was standing, pulling one of her stockings over her leg. She told him not to forget that his sister was coming tomorrow night. She really wanted to go to the pharmacy and get proper treatment. She came up behind him and poked Linen on the shoulder, causing him to jump up and immediately blush, telling her that of course he would go back there first. The madam smiled sweetly and told Linen to help his sister get rid of the curse, and then she would teach him new, more powerful knowledge. Linen immediately jumped up from his seat and rushed to the exit. Madam chuckled as she watched the retreating silhouette through the window. The system window flashed and said, "Ding. You have successfully completed the mission, Blood Feast. Your reward, plus 1,000 skull coins, plus 500 base experience. Special reward, Blood Demon Cloak, quality, highest, characteristics. While using it, you can hide your breath and essence. Introduction, invisible and powerful evil spirits always cause fear in people's hearts. Therefore, the monsters of the dark world created the Blood Demon Cloak, which allows you to become as invisible and intangible as evil spirits. Be careful, when wearing it, you also lose all your defensive abilities. Ding. You have reached a new level. Please distribute your attribute points." The following system window was displayed with information. Linen, level 9, race, human, strength 31, intelligence 35, physical stamina 44, available points 16, popularity 64. Linen sighed wearily as he studied the windows that appeared in front of him. He cried out indignantly, when did he become a psychopath with a twisted heart? Why did he spread fear? And what did it mean to seduce good women and make them pay for it? After all, even though it was his first time, it was ungodly taken away from him. Linen gritted his teeth, taking a deep breath. He leaned back in his chair and sighed wearily. The system window lit up and he upgraded his physique, changing the value from 44 to 66. Fortunately, he had fully recovered his physical fitness and had become quite resilient, otherwise he definitely wouldn't have made it through the night. Similarly, all attribute points will have to go towards improving physical abilities. Linen looked outside the window, noticing that it had already started the third day and the teacher still hadn't returned. Could something have happened? The system window labeled Event Horizon was displayed, and Linen clicked on it. Go to the Event Horizon to find out the latest news. Another system window was displayed, notifying that minus 500 skull coins had been debited from the account. Linen was transported to an empty green space where he had been before. Linen clicked on the system window, which displayed several new comments. Blood Doll, Queen, Queen, Queen. How are things going? Is that person already dead? Was he still alive last night? Flaming Ghost, Queen, please tell us in detail what happened. Long-haired Ghost, what a fool. Skeleton Demon, Queen, are you there? That guy who bullied your daughter is already dead, right? Evil Queen, Blood Puppet, Queen, you have appeared. How are you? Did this guy get what he deserved? Evil Queen, he's very powerful. Blood Puppet, what? Flaming Ghost, what's so powerful about it? Evil Queen, I was very annoyed yesterday. He's a really capable doctor. I shouldn't treat him so harshly, but I'll keep my word. Since I said I'll eat it, I'll definitely eat it. Stranger, Evil Queen, let's close the subject. He was too strong. I need to get a good night's sleep. Bye. Blood Puppet, Skeleton Demon, why do you need to sleep? Did something happen to you? Please explain. Long-haired Ghost, why do I feel like something incredible has happened? Flaming Ghost, Queen, please explain everything. Queen, what's up with that guy? The Queen, Skeleton Demon, this is a joke. A joke? Could it be that an ordinary person not only didn't die, but also dealt with the Evil Queen? Linen sighed loudly, arching one eyebrow. This woman is as direct as she can be, and she can only say things out loud. Especially on the Event Horizon network, news travels faster than the speed of light. Linen scratched the back of his head and decided to forget about it, clicking on the signs he needed and going about his other business. A system notification flashed that said you were on the local area channel's topic page, and you spent a few skull coins to write a message. Linen thought about it. This regional channel was very similar to the Alley of Wandering Souls. The teacher should not be here. Suddenly, he noticed something: the World Channel. You have the right to publish your news here without the teacher's permission. Linen pressed the button of the World Channel, asking in surprise that this was also, it turns out, some kind of permission was needed. He frowned carefully. He would have to narrow down the search a bit, but he hoped that he could find something interesting if he succeeded. The system window flashed up and read, "Important message. Has anyone been to Wandering Souls Lane? Did you see the maniac in the pharmacy? If someone knows something, please tell me. Thank you in advance." Another system window was displayed, in which there was information that you had successfully placed your news in the World Channel, having spent -1,000 skull coins on it. Linen raised his head, looking at the giant eye above him. However, many of the settings in this channel were too similar to online games. Maybe here he will find answers to all his questions. Maybe he will even get news from the human world. Linen suddenly started up, noticing something out of the corner of his eye. It was just another system window, with a huge green pentagram in the center and accept agreement written on top. The World Channel was a bridge that connected the dark dimension to the rest of the world. On a mountain in the middle of the ruins stood a humanoid creature with horns, wings, and glowing purple eyes. Creatures on other worlds can make a pact with creatures from the dark dimension through sacrifice. After signing the contract, creatures from the dark world can travel to any other world in the form of a demon messenger. Linen carefully read the information in the system windows. Connection to the rest of the world. Summoning demons, then. Linen smiled happily. Since that's the case, then can he use this opportunity to go back to his own world? A system window with a send button appeared in front of him, and he immediately clicked it with the words that the system should send him a contact immediately. Linen stood there for a while, but absolutely nothing new was happening. The system window was displayed with the following information: "Unfortunately, you do not have enough rights to enter into a settlement agreement." Linen sighed in frustration and frowned. It seems that in order to have more rights, one had to constantly raise one's level and authority. Linen added sadly that it looked like it would have to be postponed for a while. A sign that read "Shopping Area" appeared. Linen looked at it questioningly and thought that it seemed quite interesting at first glance, and it was necessary to take a look at what exactly was there. Teleportation. Shop for elite weapons in Sin City. Linen found himself on a dark street surrounded by huge buildings and various silhouettes. Various signs were burning brightly everywhere. Sin City Elite Weapons Shop sells huge black stones suitable for humanoid creatures. Price 11 skull coins. Focus to perform teleportation. In front of Linen was a huge skull with its mouth open, and a purple stone was burning brightly in the center. Shop Magic Eye offers services for restoration and modeling of limbs. Sell high-end organs. Price negotiable. Focus to perform teleportation. A huge lantern in the shape of an eye shone directly on the heart. Cyclops Slave Shop sold lady foxes straight from the purple world. Skin white, spirit controlled, trainable. Price 5 black goo coins. Focus to perform teleportation. Chained to the stone was a girl with long pink hair and fox ears, her face showing sadness. Linen looked around carefully. It all looked exactly like the same stores for players in online games. The boy walked forward on the dark road. He was wondering if traveling through such worlds does not cause a person to become addicted to the internet. The guy looked at the sign on his arm. Even the features were similar to online games. A system notification was displayed that said, "You have unlocked new features. Go to store. If you enter certain names and codes, you can go to the store you are interested in." Shop creation. Spend 10,000 skull coins to open your own shop. Trading formula. You can go to a special high-value item trading area to get additional auction and purchase services. Another window appeared in front of Linen. He decided to try opening an online store here first. However, the system said to repeat the operation. Linen thought for a moment, then realized what the matter might be and started shouting out the teleport pharmacy blood saw. He found himself in front of the doors of a huge building. Linen was standing in front of him with his arms outstretched. As he thought, Master had already opened his own shop here. Linen opened the shop's door a crack, looking inside. A system window popped up over Linen's head saying that authorization was not detected. Please try again. Linen put his hand to his chin thoughtfully. Instructions. Is it possible to enter a password? But the teacher never told him about any passwords. The system window appeared and said, "Authorization failed. Please register your store again." Linen took out the tablet and thought to himself that there was no need to worry unnecessarily, and one should just make a guess on what would be correct according to the teacher's preferences. However, the system window appeared again and said, "Command error, access denied." Lin frowned in displeasure as a window appeared in front of him where he tried to enter two phrases. One is already 200 years old, two is the cutest. And then again, command error, access denied. Lin sighed wearily, trying to enter another phrase, I love dill. Lin was sure that he already knew his teacher well enough. The next window said that access was successfully obtained. Lin went inside, noticing that the layout of the store was almost identical to the real one. Even the products were completely identical. It looked like routine maintenance was being carried out here. Lin looked up, looking carefully in front of him. This was the front desk interface from their store. He carefully studied the price list, inspection 500, reception 1000. In Lin's opinion, it was too expensive. Isn't the real store's income enough to cover the teacher's expenses? A system notification was displayed, which contained the information, maintaining cleanliness and order in the store is 500 skull coins per day. The daily maintenance costs of this store are 1 black frequency and 1000 skull coins. The remaining capital of the store, 4000 skull coins. Lin clicked on the window labeled store log. Another system board flashed up with information. Day 90, full set of adult demon organs. Get 5 skull coins. Day 93, sell the demon head from hell +1, get 1 black frequency. Day 95, rest. Day 97, soul eater eyeball +2, get 2 black cells. Day 93, sell the demon head from hell +1, get 1 black frequency. Day 95, rest. Day 97, soul eater eyeball +2, get 2 black cells frequencies. Lin frowned. These were the organs of monsters. Was this the teacher's real source of income? No wonder the teacher always came back with a couple of bags and then went back to the operating room. The pharmacy is just a cover. The illegal sale of monster organs is the teacher's main business. Lin was alarmed. These monsters were very strong, they were legendary, and only in front of the teacher they could not resist. It seems that the teacher was much stronger than he thought. The image of a teacher with a furious look that could be seen even from under the bag, chopping someone with a chainsaw, immediately appeared in my head. Lin frowned and clenched his teeth. He continued to read on. 105th day, I was approached by an old friend of mine from the Mage Association, invited to the Hangman's Tower to investigate some of the strange things that have been happening in the association lately. I haven't been a member of the Mage Association for 10 years, and it's a bit strange to be approached now. Lin frowned. This post was written 3 days ago. It seems that this was the reason for the teacher's departure. Tower of the Hanged, the Mage Association. Probably, his teacher was once a member of this organization, and since the teacher was invited by an old friend, there shouldn't be any surprises, so he didn't have to worry. Lin immediately closed his eyes tightly and shook his head from side to side. He reached out to the system and ordered it to bring him back. Now he knew about such a wide platform. So, the most important thing for him right now was to earn a lot of money and make a name for himself. Lin frowned, clenching his hands tightly into fists. To thrive on such a popular platform, you had to have a good enough product. With the unique recipes that the system creates, it will definitely be able to open up a vast market for goods in the real world. And then they will be able to use the money received to further increase their authority on the platform. Lin was standing at the table, conjuring various potions. A notification about the one that said, ding. You made 1 fatal strike potion, ding. You made 1 fatal strike potion, ding. You have perfected the fatal strike potion. Lin knitted his brows, smiling contentedly. One day, he will go to the world channel and return to his own world. Pharmacy bloody saw. Lin was determined that now was the time to get rich. Advertisement, you have spent 1000 skull coins to purchase ads. Above the house, a bright purple light shone on a sign that read, Blood Saw Pharmacy. Here you can find the best fatal blow potion. After receiving it, your attack power will increase significantly. Just 3000 skull coins per bottle. Limited quantity, 300 bottles. The price is justified. On a first come, first served basis. Only with us. Hurry up to buy. Lin stared at the open door, rubbing his hands together. It was set up to meet a huge flow of customers. However, there was no one there. His only guest was a passing leaf, blown by the wind. Lin tried not to be sad and smiled. Everything is fine, another half hour and there will definitely be no free space for visitors. The main thing was not to spend any more money. 2 hours later, Lin kept pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. Still no one was there. 3 hours later, Lin was already sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall. Still, there was still no one there. He jumped up from his seat and began to indignantly say that the ad was scrolled 5 times in a row, because he spent as much as 5,000 on it, and so far not a single coin from this ad has paid off. They just force him to do something, so Lin will show them how they sell in the human world. Lin started tapping something in the system window that appeared with quick hand movements. After a while, fireworks exploded brightly over his house, and an advertising banner above the house showed a girl with huge breasts, showing a heart out of it, horns on her head and a smile on her face, urging click here. A notification appeared that read, Sensation. The secret to making a sick man fatter and stronger is revealed. The greatest healer passionately shared the secret, which caused the Witcher to blush, and the queen shouted that it was not enough who drank this potion. 1 bottle, and the clothes will disappear. 2 bottles, and you will ascend to heaven guaranteed. 3 bottles, you're as furious as a bulldozer. Do you want to be a real man with the power equal to the sky? Come to the Bloodsaw Pharmacy. Linen smiled smugly. This is just the first trick, and then more. Another window flashed up and said, "You have registered a new username, Little Octopus Monster. You have registered a new username." Lolita smiled. "You have registered a new username, Mr. Dark Macho. You have registered a new username, Fast as a Bullet. You have registered a new username, Professional Shopper." The next window was filled with comments. Little Octopus Monster, wow. The expectorant potion at the Bloodsaw Pharmacy isn't very expensive, right? They give all men a ticket to the queue. Madness that not every man can stand. Lolita's smile, no way. How can you just share such a treasure of medicine with the public? And that's for just 3,000 skull coins per bottle. Why is it so cheap? Mr. Dark Macho, don't be silly. Be careful, otherwise they will raise the price of medicine. Let anyone buy it. Doesn't it smell, by the way? Quick as a bullet, is this potion really that effective? Professional buyer, very effective. After getting addicted to all sorts of potions, I was able to increase my combat power by 2 times. Every time I attack, I can land a perfect hit. Quick as a bullet, can it explode? Mr. Dark Macho, anything can explode. Get your potion and try it out for yourself. I assure you, you will not regret it. Linen smiled contentedly. A second later, a lot of monsters rushed towards the pharmacy. He saw notifications appearing one after the other, systems that had the names of various creatures written on them one after the other. Dark Giant Rob, please come to our store. Fallen Spirit Bull, please come to our store. Spirit of the Virgin, please come to our store. Multi-armed Demon, please come to our store. Linen opened the door and saw many creatures in front of him in the courtyard. Someone shouted and asked if the miracle about the effect of such a magic potion was really true, and it is only sold in this pharmacy. Is there really a top-notch potion that can make you super powerful and make even the evil queen convulse in fear of this potion? Linen stepped back, and the passageway was crowded with monsters, pushing each other aside. Cyclopes, walking corpses, bulls, and other local interesting contingent. One of them said that he urgently needed 10 bottles of his potion, and he wanted them immediately right now. The other talked and asked Linen about whether he was really the best demon hunter, and he needed as many as 50 bottles of a similar potion, and he urgently wanted to try it. Linen thought with disappointment that the people here were of course simple, and even too simple. He looked away thoughtfully, smiling, since they were standing on the doorstep of the pharmacy and begging for his miracle potion to be sold to them, ready to take several dozen at once. It would be a sin not to earn some extra money.